My name is Andrea Love, and I am a stop motion animator. I co-directed the film, and the film is called TULIP. It's a 9-minute adaptation of Thumbelina by Hans Christian Andersen, and I made this film with Phoebe.
Yeah, I'm Phoebe Wahl, and I'm a children's book author and illustrator and a designer. And I wrote the script for the film and helped with fabrication and did the character designs and co-produced and co-directed it with Andrea. So Andrea and I met in like 2017 or 2018, and we knew right away that we wanted to collaborate on something, but we weren't quite sure what it was going to be. And we kind of cycled through a couple different ideas of projects, and we landed on adapting Thumbelina because it felt like a really nice structure to work within of adapting an old fairy tale. And I'm a sucker for huge flowers and tiny elfin people. So it felt really perfect in that sense. It gave us a lot of really rich aesthetics and characters and stuff to work with, while still being kind of familiar and drawing people in with that kind of story that they might have grown up hearing or seeing. So yeah, we kind of just felt out how it was going to work. It felt natural that I would kind of spearhead writing the script as a writer. And of course, natural that Andrea would do, the bulk of the fabrication and animation as a stop motion artist. And so it was a really fun collaborative process. And yeah, I don't know. It was just, it all came about very kind of naturally, and we had so much fun making it. And it's definitely just been like a total passion project. Well, I think, like I said, it gave us kind of such a rich starting point with characters that might be familiar and visuals that feel really magical and striking and very conducive to Andrea and I's world. With the lush florals and gardens and the softness of it all, since we were making it all out of wool and fabric. But I thought it would be a really fun chance too to just retell a fairy tale in a way that I think, specifically Thumbelina, most adaptations I've ever seen of it, she's kind of born as this teenager / adult. And I kind of feel like most recent adaptations have done that because there's a lot of themes in the story about marriage and marriageability and love and, things you get in a lot of fairy tales. But I always thought it was particularly kind of strange and scary with Thumbelina, given that she is written as a little child. And so I thought it would be fun to kind of take Thumbelina and make it for a slightly younger age, relatable for a slightly younger age, using a younger protagonist and have her being born as an actual baby. And kind of taking out those love and marriage themes that, we see in it traditionally, which, it's not that kids shouldn't have stories where there's, risk and adversity and stuff like that, but I'm kind of let them be free from this, having to fall in love at the end and having to be forcibly married to a mole in a tunnel, and how scary that is. So I was maybe there's other ways that we can kind of touch on these themes without having it be so much about, being sold as a child bride. So that was definitely also inspiring it too, to kind of create a gentler, more younger kid friendly version of it, where she was actually a kid and where she got to also return to her mom at the end and live in both worlds. Because in the original Thumbelina, she just goes and lives with the fairies at the end and falls in love with the fairy prince. And there's no mention of her mom ever again, which also was really sad to me as a kid and as an adult rereading it. And is kind of traumatic, I think, as a kid, to be oh, she just never found her home. So we were there's got to be a middle ground. It doesn't have to be as black and white as she's in one world or the other.
Love the way that fiber looks on screen. There's just something, yeah, so emotional, vulnerable, and imperfect in all of its little, tendrils that kind of create this sort of fuzzy world.
I think similar to like claymation, it just has this really alive feeling. Like it feels like there's life in the fiber itself, and it kind of like it has a life of its own. When Andrea's animating with it, and when you see it move, it's really magical to watch. How Andrea made these puppets come to life. It never ceases to amaze me as someone who's kind of in on it, but also like the magic is very much alive for me because so much of it, happened when we were working separately. So
my wool stop motion is primarily using a technique called needle felting. So the premise is pretty simple. It's the process of taking wool roving or batting. So it's wool that hasn't been spun into yarn yet. And then you use a little needle that has little barbs at the end. And when you poke the wool, it pushes it in and it tangles it. And you just continue to poke it until you find the shape that you want. And I needle felt over wire armatures. So that is how we can get all this movement with our puppets. And I incorporate some rigid foam into my puppets as well. So I have something to felt onto and to grab it when I'm animating. So, the process of animation is moving the puppets very slightly in between each still frame. So I do 12 frames a second, and you just have to get a very micro, small movement on those puppets to create the motion. And we use the wool in our puppets, but we also use the wool in our sets. So the wool roving is what you see on the ground, but then we also decided we wanted to incorporate other types of felt as well. So fabric felt that we made into foliage, and then we incorporated a little bit of other materials like paper mache and some little trinkets that we found at the antique store to round out our whole visual look. But anything that we could imagine to make out of felt and wool, we really tried to do that.
The kind of balance between the beauty and that imperfection, and also kind of always chasing the perfection as the goal. Because I always feel like, the day I create a perfect piece of art is the day that I'm done being an artist, because then I never have anything I'm striving towards. So to me, so much of it is about that process of like always getting closer and closer and closer to what my exact vision is. But maybe never quite getting there. And that is kind of what creates some of the magic. Because I think we see a lot of imperfection and humanity in their characters. The old woman doesn't want to let Tulip go outside because she thinks she's too small and she'll get lost. And I think I really kind of like the gray area that approach falls into, because it feels very realistic to me that like, she's really scared and she wants to protect her from this thing, but it also doesn't allow Tulip to be, fully her own person. It doesn't teach her how to be independent and teach her how to deal with risk and stuff. So there's imperfection we see, in the mother's approach in the beginning of the story that then gets shifted a little bit towards the end of the story, when she sees that Tulip did go out and face all this adversity and she's okay. And then, with her last line of "be back before supper," at the end of the film, it's kind of a hint at the fact that she has emotionally grown a little bit, that she's willing to let Tulip live in both of those worlds, and face a little bit of risk, but trust that she's going to come home at the end of the day. And with Tulip too, we see her, constantly adapting to being in situations that are kind of scary, and, you know, risky, but that also she's able to really find connection and, you know, have really expansive experiences. So also kind of playing with that imperfect duality of like scary things can happen. But you know, she also makes lots of friends and meets lots of creatures who help her, and she learns how to ask for help. And you know, even in things like the voice recording, some of my favorite lines that the actors recorded were ones that they messed up. Our sweet little actress who played Tulip, Maria, who was like 6 years old when she recorded. My favorite line in the whole film is when she says, "I'm lost, I'm alone, and I'm afraid I'll never see my mother again." And we realized when we were going through the recordings that we didn't have a clean take of her saying that. Every take, she kind of like choked up a little bit or like fumbled over the line or like swallowed or took a breath. And we decided to just leave that in because it broke our hearts to hear. Like we were like, oh my God, this makes it so much sweeter and sadder and better because of that like imperfect humanity. And I love the way she voices Tulip because of that way she has of speaking. And she had never acted before. And I think also that really lent itself to like the real sweetness of this character, I think, comes from her imperfection of just reading those lines however she thought they should be read, you know, without having a kind of like actor approach to it. And a lot of my work kind of revolves around making the things that I think I really wanted to see and make and have when I was a kid. I am like very obsessed by kind of returning to the childhood mindset, and you know, the creative places that I inhabited as a kid and the worlds that I disappeared into as a kid. And so I feel like almost all my art and most of my life is kind of chasing that, you know, feeling and trying to get back there because it feels like that is my essential self, you know, is myself at like 9 or 10. And so I'm creating things for myself at that age and, you know, hoping that that will bring other people and other kids along, you know, with me. Because, yeah, I think I love the idea of kids being as kind of enveloped and inspired by maybe the things Andrea and I are making or the books that I make or something that I was, you know, by the things that I consumed as a kid. Because when I think about the art that had the biggest impact on me growing up, like I definitely loved, you know, art in museums and stuff like that. But when I think about the things that I had the most kind of like intimate, like spiritual connections with, it was these tiny little details in children's books. It was moments, you know, in an animation or a film. It was the feeling of like curling up and reading a book and like being totally enveloped in a world. So I think to me, like the fact that we might be able to get anywhere near that by making things like Tulip is like the most exciting thing in the world.
And I'll also add that I really hope that the animation work I do can help inspire kids to try their hands at fiber art. Like I love the idea that someone will watch this film and want to learn how to needle felt and how to make a cute little puppet. So yeah, having that, you know, screen entertainment, but then translating that into something physical and artistic that these kids can do is really exciting as well.